Okay, hello everybody. You all enjoying yourselves so far? Yeah, hope you're lots of takeaways halfway through the day now. So welcome back. This is the second panel of the day, and we are focusing on AI and ethics. Now, we know that AI is transforming education, but how do we ensure responsible and ethical use? This is what we're going to be exploring over the next half hour in this panel. But first, I'd like to ask the panel to introduce themselves. So we'll go right to left. We'll start with Sandra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Woolley from Computer Science.
Hello, I am Aristotle Kallis from Humanities.
I'm Namita from the School of Life Sciences, master's student.
Hi. Hello. I'm Dr. Alami Sami from Life Sciences, lecturer in neuroscience.
I'm Laura Milne. I'm not from Keele. I'm from the University of Chester.
Hi, I'm Jack Medlin. I'm a PhD candidate in the School of Social Sciences, but I've done a whole bunch of work at Keele over the last 7 years around AI and whatnot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, panel, for introducing yourselves. So we'll start with the question, ethical use. So we've heard this morning, really, ethical use covers so many areas. We've heard about how it impacts in terms of privacy, IP, fairness, transparency, bias, trust. But what do you feel, and I'll put this to all the panellists, what do you feel are the most important in education in terms of ethical use? What's the most important in education? And I will start with Sandra.
Thank you. Well, I think as the attendance here shows, these are difficult questions, and we're all interested to learn more. And so it's really great that we've now got this framework at Keele as well. So for me, it's difficult to choose between these important things, but I would say transparency. I think transparency is going to be really important. And in fact, in the previous session, we were also talking about co-creation. And if we can do more co-creation, then there will be necessarily a lot more transparency in the things that we do. If there's time for just one more quick item, it's a sign of the times that we have in computer science a final year module on data ethics and AI ethics. And we look at the ethical frameworks, and we look at all of the interesting things that we've been discussing today. And we discuss AI, and we give aspects, components of the coursework to different AI tools. And we discuss in the class those outputs. And I think that the students find it useful. They certainly engage very well. And overall, I would say that that's been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Second means that I already have fewer things to say, which is great. So as we go down, it will probably be a similar thing. So transparency, absolutely. Integrity. How can we detect any more original voice, original input? To me, that is really, really important in that respect. And of course, I'm going to sneak in two more, sorry. Equality of access, equality of knowledge of use, that is becoming very, very important. I teach modules in the GCP pathway. We used to call it Digital Futures. And what the students find most fascinating is when we talk about digital divide. Well, that digital divide is already here, and now it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's building. There are layers of digital device and different forms of intersectionality for that device. And lastly, I would say, how do we ensure, if not maximize, agency in an AI world? What do we do as humans? In the morning, we heard in a very, very inspiring talk about co-intelligence in many ways. How do we work together? It's sort of 1 + 1 = 3. So how do we keep that element of agency in this process?
Thank you. And from the student perspective?
From the student perspective, I think the most important thing that ethical use concerns is the question of plagiarism, academic plagiarism, as well as class assessment related plagiarism. I think as a student, even though we haven't come across any very egregious cases so far, but the threat of students just straight up using AI for their assessments instead of relying on books and relying on research materials as they did in the olden days is, you know, I mean, I mean, as in, like, I'm talking about somebody from a younger perspective. From a younger person's perspective.
We
I
understand,
don't
don't worry.
In the olden days.
We were all there, we
I-
promise.
I mean, it's less about that, but it's about the fact that nowadays people can literally just plug in their assessments into AI and they will get an answer. And many people are sort of doing this under the table, even though we hear about it. I haven't come across any very serious cases so far, but it is a thing that happens. It's a thing that happens under the covers, you can say. So I think from the student perspective, that's something that matters to me a lot.
Ella?
Thank you. Can I add something new to the equation? So we all enjoyed whatever discussed, and it is fascinating, and I agree with all of them. But I think as educators and those who are supporting education, our main responsibility here to ensure that next generation's brains are not hijacked. We are responsible to our next generation because this society is going to build on whatever we are safeguarding, and we are responsible in safeguarding them learning knowledge using AI in ethical formats. So that is one of the things I want to mention. And second one would be inclusivity as we think about ethics in AI. It's not just ethics that we scrutinize as students because they are using it, but also how we as educators, policymakers, leaders of higher educations, and support team in ITs and administrative teams, we are actually employing AI technology in an ethical way. Thank you.
I really like your radical reframing that we have to safeguard the minds of the next generation. On a very mundane, boring note after that, data protection, data processing, how and where data is processed, kept, stored, it's compliance, it's legally compliant that we have to be sensitive to how we're using data at the university. And I think it's something that, unless you stop to think about it, you might not think about your data use in AI tools. We have a saying that if the tool is free, your data is the cost. And that's something that you might want to think about next time you generate something quickly and easily using AI.
So it's always difficult going last. It's okay. So I think one thing I'd like to touch on is kind of leading on from what Mike spoke about this morning, is talking about cultural biases. So obviously we know that generative AI is developed and trained by liberal white academic males. However, when you look at it through the lens of social mobility, those who benefit the most from this technology fall far outside of that category. That's something I'll touch on later in the assessment panel because you get twice the amount of me today. In psychology, so I did my undergraduate in psychology, we talk about something known as the weird problem. So that is that most of psychological studies and the samples of those studies are made up of Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic individuals. And that can be the same for kind of generative AI. So an over-reliance on generative AI kind of exacerbates that problem. We're kind of getting rid of the diverse thinking and cognitive processes that we're used to, and we're kind of now applying this across disciplines and in the labour market. We're using models aimed to think like 5% of the population and applying them to challenges impacting the majority of the population. And I think when we're talking around cultural biases, we also have to acknowledge some of the ethical issues that have got us to this point. Obviously, these models are trained using large data sets, which are often trolled from the internet. And obviously, these data sets have to be moderated in some way. There are quite graphic content in these. There's things that are illegal, things that we don't want to go into these models. And someone somewhere has to go through all of this data and remove that things. And that's typically done by underpaid labour in developing countries like Kenya. So I think it's really important that when we think about AI, we actually think about some of the ethical struggles that individuals have had to go through, and that we keep this in mind when we're using these tools to benefit ourselves.
Thank you. So now I'd just like to come to our academic staff on the panel. And my question here is, what does this mean, therefore, in terms of discipline? Are there any specific ethical considerations or implications for your discipline? And if I could start with Ella first.
Thank you. I just want to go revisit what European Union Academic Integrity Committee suggests, that part of the ethics in AI use is the role of academic in designing the question, designing that learning outcomes, and telling students how to use it. And to do so, it's not just the students that needs to be trained to use these technology appropriately, but also we need to have regular training for academic staff. We have diverse digital literacy among academic staff as well as the students. And the second thing that would support and enables academics is the ability to ethically provide the software that everyone can equally access, because not everyone can afford it. We had this nice talk from Samir and others in previous hours that can afford the subscriptions, whether they are academic or students. So how we can actually inspire students to use the tool ethically, to learn, not to allow that software hijack their brain and therefore affects their employability and all the things, nice things that we discussed. Thank you.
Aristotle. What does it mean in terms of a discipline? You know, what are the ethical considerations from your area?
Yes. Well, I'm a historian, so I was thinking about our own practice in terms of what we teach and what we do in our research and so on and so forth. And as a discipline, we tended to value long-form writing, research leading to long-form writing. And I suppose there is something very honorable about this thing, but AI did not cause the problem, into inverted commas here. We over-relied on assessing the outcome over the process. That was happening anyway, but I think the AI brought us face to face with questions of integrity and made us rethink a little bit the process. So I think of all the disciplines, humanities-based disciplines are more exposed in that particular respect, trying to detect the voice of the student. But here is also the opportunity, that I would say, to reverse that process, not forget the outcome, but look back through the whole process as part of what we may consider assessment, but also as part of understanding the student journey and building skills that are transferable afterwards along this process.
Finally, briefly.
Okay, for us in computer science, oh boy. Oh boy, it's exciting. Our students are hugely interested. We're having to rewrite our lecture slides constantly. Things are moving so fast. And in common with yourselves, we have that challenge around ensuring that our students learn to use these tools well, and that it enhances their learning, which, as Mike has demonstrated earlier, there's fantastic opportunities, but if they're not used appropriately, then it perishes learning.
So I'd like to return to our students again, just to get a sense really how, Namitha and Jack, how are you using AI in your, and how is it supporting you in your studies?
For us, since I'm in the life sciences department, and it's a research-based course, it's a research-oriented course, you can say, I definitely use AI in order to compile papers, compile literature sources. And actually earlier last semester, the Jan semester, we actually had an assessment where we had to critically evaluate how well AI is able to produce an output. So we were given a topic, and that topic we had to compare and contrast, sort of, with existing literature as well as AI related literature. So what is going on in this area of study, and how are they, how has this developed, etc. We plug that into AI, and the AI answers questions, and then we have to look at literature. And what that literature tells us, we have to compare and contrast with how well AI has been able to summarize that. So this was an exercise in creativity, sorts of. This was an exercise in testing how well AI actually is able to give us relevant sources. And that, I think, is very important, because that is, as they say, critical evaluation. So you're critically evaluating the research as well as you're critically evaluating how well AI is able to provide you a source. And the fact that we were given an assignment like that is actually really good, really helpful for us. But we still do continue to use AI while maintaining a critical eye or a critical outlook toward it. And I think that's important to do.
Thank you, Jack. I think that's very reassuring. Jack, from your perspective,
Yeah,
in terms of Gen AI tools, how are you using them? What purpose is it benefiting your study?
So for someone that talks about AI so much, I really didn't use AI that much until the last few years. I think the last year has kind of changed that. I come from a first-in-family background in terms of coming to higher education. I don't necessarily have those traditional support networks that a lot of students have. So quite often I find myself using AI kind of as a person to talk to discuss complex topics, to challenge myself, to introduce new concepts, and to explore avenues for kind of future research. I used to be chronically disorganized. I've used AI to kind of help me organize my studies. I've now got an entire system which allows me to track papers that I've read, thoughts that I've had, and whatnot. And I think that's really helped me kind of keep sane doing my PhD. I think adding on to what Ash spoke about earlier in the employer panel, I think one of the biggest uses I've found in AI has come to programming and coding. I come from a very soft sciences, like humanities background, where programming isn't something that I'm confident with or comfortable with. However, my PhD is very quantitative heavy. I do machine learning, I do heavy statistics. So actually using things like Copilot and GitHub has really allowed me to hit the ground running when it comes to developing quite complex models in programming languages, which in the past I would have spent a year of my PhD trying to learn, whilst actually being able to kind of have a hands-on assistant whilst doing it has allowed me to speed up that process while still learning those skills. So I think it's really bridging the gap in terms of social mobility, but also bridging the gap between disciplines, allowing people from humanities backgrounds and whatnot who weren't as confident in terms of heavy quantitative analysis to now embed that within their research.
That's a really good point, thank you. I'd like to come to Laura now. Laura, from your perspective, what's the most important thing to consider when evaluating potential AI tools from an ethical perspective?
Well, from an ethical perspective, we've said a few of the keywords in what we consider important already, but thinking about the digital divide, is this a tool that's going to widen or close the digital divide? Is this a tool that uses data responsibly? Is the data processing happening in a black box in a server in a country that is not friendly to the UK? That's something you really, really need to consider. So I think when I'm evaluating a tool, I often think through what might be a standard data protection impact assessment process of thinking about those sorts of things. Where's the data processed? How's it captured? How long is it on a server? But then also, on the other hand, thinking through an equality impact assessment, which if you've ever done an ethics form and had to do an EIA for that, it can be quite a thinky task, but thinking about how is this going to impact people with protected characteristics? How's it going to impact people with access issues? So that's what I'd evaluate on an ethical perspective, just because you have to make sure that you can take the whole university with you. If you don't think about those things, you're only going to be able to take some of the university with you. And the other side of that is, how am I going to create scaffolding and support around this tool so that it can be used by the whole university? Because, as we all know, digital skills competencies vary greatly between staff members, vary greatly between students, and you can only have equitable access if you raise that bar for everybody.
Thank you. The other thing we've talked a lot about this morning, really, in the context of AI and ethics, has been about how can we support staff and students with ethical use of AI to enhance critical thinking, and how can we develop creativity skills, but how can we do this without, at the same time, offloading the cognitive function? So I'd like to ask again our academics on the panel this. Aristotle, can I start with you, please?
I think that the issue of digital, whatever we decide to call it, I always have a problem finding the right word for it. Let's call it agility, for want of a better word. It's something that we talk over a lot of times, and I think it's becoming more and more of critical value right now. And I would say academics sometimes talk about it more about student concern. I would say that it's at least equal, and in some respects, if educators are actually designing part of the learning experience, then there should be far more of that agility built into this particular process. And I would say the other thing that I would emphasize with regard to this is the transparency of the procedure that we as educators put in place for our students. What do we expect? What do we want to achieve? And in that respect, I think we have to be transparent as educators in the same way that we expect a similar degree of transparency from our students as to how they're working. Sandra? Yeah.
Oh wow. I teach animation to computer scientists, and that's fun, perhaps a bit more fun than data ethics. And students love to be creative. Computer science students are rather averse to the idea of being an artist, but they love being creative. So we have opportunities to use these various tools to encourage and aid our students that perhaps aren't normally creative to be more creative. And I'm certainly going to be making use of them again in my teaching.
Ella, finally.
Thank you. How can we support staff and students? Again, I would like to visit EU's academic integrity platforms. They invested millions on agile education, and it stands for agile EDU. And in that, they suggest we need to have principle. I think in previous panels we talked about principle and policy and policing. Instead of policing, I like to use what EU uses as audit. So it's kind of softer tone, and it's nice to revisit every maybe 6 months, at least once a year, what we are doing. In order for us to literally build on that ethical use, we need to use it ethically, and we need to encourage our students to use it ethically. And hopefully we are not deviating too much from what is expected, and we are not actually hijacking their brains. And in terms of the how we integrate it, we had centers as well as the computer sciences. In biological sciences, let's be sharing good practice. We have practicals on the use of AI and use it to actually for learning and use it ethically to actually enhance learning and giving literally real life example in CSL to use the Copilot, which is university approved, to just gather the initial fundamentals about the question, and then after that going and searching and reading proper papers and books and book chapters in the library. I can see our nice librarians are also presented here as well. Thank you.
And Namita, if I can just come to you, how do you feel we can support students better with this?
Supporting students better with the use of AI, I think That's a bit of a, you can say a radical change is required in that sense, because I think reviving some of the more traditional student-teacher mentorship can actually do that, in the sense that if a teacher is willing to completely engage with their class, or if a professor is willing to engage with their class, then the students wouldn't feel the need to use AI, in my opinion. So the students might depend on AI because they feel like their professor is not explaining things adequately in the class, sometimes. From a student perspective, I can tell you that, and from my personal experience, I can tell you that. No personal vendettas against anyone. I'm just being honest. Yeah, but I'm not naming any names, but I'm just being honest. Yeah, so I think this sometimes what happens is that the teachers or the professors just end up telling students, okay, you have to do this as an assignment, and then don't follow up on it as much. That's why the students might feel the need to run to, external factors in order to, finish their assessments. So in my opinion, I think this could be changed. I think a more holistic support or help by the professors themselves could actually help students a lot more.
Thank you for your honesty. I'm conscious that we've literally got a minute, so this is my final question before we open it up. And this is to Sandra and Jack, and if I can ask you to be brief, please. I'll start with Sandra and then move to Jack. What should be in guidance and ethical use? So Sandra, from your perspective, and also Jack, from your student perspective. I can start with you first, Sandra.
Oh, briefly. Right. Gosh, I guess we all want to know. I think tangible examples, and examples that are relevant to the audience. So for us as educators, examples that are relevant to course creation and assessment, but also for the students too, telling them how they can be ethical and make ethical use.
The last word to Jack.
Yeah,
from Jack, rather.
Like we've said, I think guidance should be principle-based instead of something rigid that really doesn't work for AI. It evolves too quickly. I think the thing that I think is most important to be in guidance is to have the student voice there. And I mean students that are currently on the ground learning, not necessarily just sabbatical officers who haven't been in study for a few years. And I think that's the way of doing it.
Thank you. Thank you for being very concise. If we very quickly open it, are there any questions at all for the panel? And just direct them to.
Thanks. So it seems that from this morning and from this panel as well about ethical use and student use of AI, it seems that there's no authentic written assignments anymore, basically. So my question to you is, should we just have a complete removal of written assignments? Because I might be a bit of a pessimist, but I personally do not believe our students will be honest in their use of AI. So does that lead to now just changing away from that, or bringing back in your typical exam hall written assignments?
Okay, go for it.
So I radically want to change assessment at university. I think that the essay is still a legitimate assessment form for some disciplines. So we need to, and writing as thinking, there's a book called Writing as Thinking. I can't remember who it's by, but it's on my to-read list. I think writing as thinking is an important academic skill. I think we just need to shake up how we think about it. And as an endpoint assessment, particularly for first years, I don't think the essay is the way to go.
More or less, I agree with that, but we shouldn't deprive, that's unethical, as actually. We shouldn't deprive a student from using AI. So that is unethical. The same way that we are not depriving anyone from using Word, Excel, Access, or any other software that we find it extremely useful. I remember DOS-based typing and EndNotes and so on. So it's now different eras, so we need to. But I agree we need diversity in assessment, and all the skills matter, all of them, all of these assessments. Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. Just briefly, Aristotle, this is obviously may impact humanities.
I would say yes and no. no, we shouldn't abandon it. AI can actually add value to it, but we have to rethink of it. But yes, in some respects, why did we end up relying so much on written assignments in the first place? That is part of the question, rather than just blaming AI.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions? We've got 2 more, and then I think we'll have to call it there.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so just a follow-up on what he said. So you said it's unethical not to encourage them to use it, but looking at the written... Sorry.
I didn't say encourage. I said it's unethical if we block anyone.
If we
from
block
it.
them, okay,
Yes.
sorry for that, yeah. So I'm just thinking from a wider perspective, looking at a university, we have Turnitin and all that, but we are not able to detect the amount of AI that is being
Up your
used
game.
with written essays. And what we saw this morning is even very, very difficult. So I think that if you look at it, it's not also fair for others that do not use it. So at the end of the day, you are marking a written essay, and Turnitin score doesn't even tell you, like, it doesn't, you know, this is not like written by the original.
We will get there, you know, like the same way that we had AI-driven cars these days. We are going to get there to have the software that detects immaculately what is AI-generated.
But in the
already have it.
meantime, what
In
do
the
we do?
meanwhile, mixture of assessments, bringing back the campus-based assessment for writings instead of online, so a student cannot actually access the platforms, and they need to actually pour out the knowledge they learned, the understanding, and just write those sentences for the time being. But fundamentally, we need to diversify assessments, not for the sake of AI, but for the sake of diversity in our societies. For 100 years, hundreds of years, we just focus on, as Aristotle said, on essay writings. We know that majority of people can actually express themselves or showcase their abilities through art, through video recordings, through presentations, through dialogues, through diverse forms of ways that we can assess their knowledge and understandings.
Right. Okay, thank you. Final word I'd like to give to Namitha. I'm really sorry we're going to have to wrap up because we are 5 minutes over. Namitha, do you want to have the final word from the student perspective?
Yeah, I don't think we need to abolish written assessments per se, but I think there needs to be a sort of mechanism where, we actually realize that the students have followed up or actually learned what they're actually writing, So a sort of follow-up, as in to know that the student can actually account for what they're writing. That's important. So that alongside with the written assessments can go a long way.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panel, a bit of a whistle-stop tour there for the half an hour. I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, it almost raises more questions than answers, but yeah, that's the nature of ethics. But thank you to everybody in the panel. And now it's time for lunch.